So I guess this week there was what something like Valentine's Day, what for me used to be known as Single Awareness Day. But we actually didn't do anything too special. We were at a prayer mountain, so yeah, happy Valentine's Day to us. But regardless, we're going to continue in our series. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the word for today. So I wanted to start off with a very simple question. And we're going to talk about wisdom today. But the question I want to ask you is, why do we desire wisdom? Why is wisdom something we think is good to attain? Right? So why is wisdom good? What do you guys think? Nobody wants to be wise? Or is it silence wisdom? Is that something that's going on here?
Saves our energy.
Save your energy, okay. We have a brother here who likes the word efficient, right? So he would think wisdom is efficiency, right? Right, someone? No. Anything else? Become smart, okay. So if you think about these things, being smart, saving your energy and such, a lot of times we kind of connect wisdom to success. That people that are wise or seek wisdom often are more quote-unquote successful. Right? Even biblically, like who is known as the wise guy in the Bible? It's King Solomon, right? And so with the story of Solomon, we see that him choosing wisdom actually gave him not just wisdom, but many things. He had riches, he had social connections, he had everything, right? And so a lot of times we connect wisdom to success. Now, as I said before, and my voice is really raspy because those are some nice songs. But regardless, as I said before, like me and my wife actually started watching the Sky Castle a couple of weeks ago. We actually stopped because I don't know. It got to a point where it was just a little bit too much. But regardless, we stopped. But what were they seeking in this show, Sky Castle, that was so popular, the past few months? What were they seeking?
Success.
They were trying to find out how to get into success by getting into school everything, right?
Yeah.
To get into this medical school, which honestly is not that big of a deal. But regardless, they were trying to find the way, right? So the very first episode, they're trying to talk to the mother and find out what she did to get her son into this and all these things. And so you see that in many ways, people are always looking for like a different path, a more direct path, a simpler path. They're looking for ways to get ultimately success. But one of the things I'm going to actually show you is that when we get into wisdom, at least godly wisdom, it looks nothing like this. Okay? So we're going to look at James 3, verses 13 and 18. So open up your Bible, smartphones, or look at the screen. James 3, 13 to 18. Where the Lord says this. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. Now our theme for this year again is on holiness and understanding that we are called to be holy as God is holy, and in that way we are called to be set apart. We've been going through the book of James and we've been seeing these continuous themes, and I'm actually going to touch back on many of these today. But really last week I kind of left you guys on a cliffhanger, right? Where the point of last week was that the tongue is a very powerful tool, right? It can be used for both good and for evil, but unfortunately, because of our own sinful nature, it is mostly used for evil, not good, evil. And so the question is, how do we address this? How do we learn to tame the tongue, right? And So that's the question that was left with you guys last week. Now, if you also look back at the beginning of chapter 3, it started off by saying, that you should be very careful about wanting to be teachers, because teachers will be judged more strictly. Now, the reason why they came out is because, as I said before, teachers gained a lot of respect, they were given a lot of honor, and so people naturally wanted to be in a place of authority, right? And so being a teacher was one of those places. So James warns them by saying, be careful, because that tongue, that thing that you use to teach is very, very powerful. It can be very easily misused. And now he counters that by talking about wisdom. The way you control, the way you tame your tongue is by using wisdom, by being wise. I titled the passage to say, heaven wise. I kind of got that from, the old slang of like, you're streetwise. But for those of us that understand what God desires, this is what wisdom is supposed to look like. Now, the beginning of this passage is going to focus mostly on what wisdom is not. Okay? So we're going to focus first on what wisdom is not, and then we're going to look at what godly wisdom is. And one of the things that actually sticks out that isn't all that clear necessarily is that faith and wisdom go hand in hand, because he starts off the passage by saying, you know wisdom by its good deeds. Remember chapter 2, James also said, you know faith by its deeds. Right? So James is actually connecting faith and wisdom, and you'll see as we go through the text, it's a little bit more clear as you start unpacking certain things. But faith and wisdom go hand in hand. So if you believe in God, if you truly believe in a sovereign, powerful, loving, and merciful God, that actually leads to godly wisdom. And so James continues and says that for someone who is wise, they should show a good life representing Christ by what? By their good deeds and through their humility. Right? Humility. Now, this word also can be translated as meekness. Right? So for someone who is seen as wise is actually someone who is seen as meek and humble. A good example of this from the Bible will be Moses. Right? Moses was one of the greatest leaders of all time. Think about it. He led an entire country. If you do the census, it was around, I think, 700,000 men. But if you include women and children, that's probably over 2 million people. Okay? So this one man was leading 2 million people through a desert for 40 years. That is insane leadership. Right? But if you actually go back into the story of Moses, he gets in an argument with his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam, and they're getting an argument, but Moses refuses to say anything about it. He refuses to speak his mind. He refuses to exert his authority. And so because of that, God himself shows up. He's like, y'all better shut your mouths. This is my boy Moses, okay? Listen to him. And that, brothers and sisters, is an example of meekness. Moses was clearly in a position where he could say, you're my older brother, but so what? I'm leading 2 million people, right? God is with me. I got the staff. I can turn into a snake. I can do all sorts of crazy things. But Moses didn't do that. He instead chose not to speak up. And if you really look at many of the biblical characters that we look up towards and that are seen as examples of faith, they're actually people that chose a route of humility and meekness. So the question is, brothers and sisters, what really motivates us? What drives us? What is the reason why we get up every day? What is the reason why we do the things that we do, whether we're at work, whether we're studying? What is motivating you? What is driving you? And that's something James is really touching upon when he's getting into what wisdom is. And so as we get into this further, brothers and sisters, as we're focusing on what wisdom isn't, I want you to ask yourself this question. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, what is motivating you? Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Is it, is it because I see this as something God desires of me, I see this as something that glorifies God, or is there something else? What this passage talks about is actually bitter envy and selfish ambition. Right? And James says, if that is the heart, if that is the root of what you're doing, that is not godly wisdom. If your motivation is bitter envy and selfish ambition, then you're going in the wrong direction. Now, brothers and sisters, if we be honest with ourselves, and if we, even when we look at something as silly as that show, Sky Castle, right? Their motivation was they wanted to be better than other people, right? Or at the very least, they wanted to compete with their neighbors. They wanted to at least be on par with their neighbors. And if you really think about it, this is oftentimes what drives us. Why we want to do certain things, why we want to be certain people, is because we're either envious or we have ambition. Right? Envy meaning you look at the people around them and you see things that you desire, see things that you want to be, and so you desire these things that aren't yours. Right? That's envy. Or ambition. You just have great desires for yourself. You have great ideas and you're like, I'm going to be amazing. Right? I joked about this before, but my name, Teo, means big glory. Right? And my parents never gave me ambitions. They never told me, well actually, my dad kept talking to me about being a medical missionary. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But anyway, so regardless of that, they never told me to do well in school. My parents are the anti-Korean parents. Right? They were never home, honestly. So as far as they knew, they didn't know whether I was studying or not, but I was the one who was driven. And why? Because my name means big glory. Not little glory, big glory. So I had ambitions. And so I made it my own desire. I was like, you know what? I want to go into a top 15 school in America. I don't know where I came up with that number, but I had in the number in my head, top 15. I was not going to be happy unless I got into the top 15. And so I drove myself. I had great ambitions, I had great desires, and to an extent I achieved it. But brothers and sisters, this was my desire. This was me. Now I know this is a little bit dated. There was also a show that I used to watch, like when I was in high school, Animaniacs, and there's a character Pinky and the Brain, and there's these two mouses, and like Pinky is kind of this like idiotic mouse, and the Brain is this really brilliant mouse, and every time the Brain wants to do one thing, right? Pinky always asks him, "What do you want to do, Brain?" He's like, "We're going to take over the world," right? That was the heart of this little mouse. And that was the whole premise behind this TV show. It actually became its own separate show. But brothers and sisters, selfish ambition oftentimes drives us to do the things that we're doing. Right? Whether it's to excel in the classroom, whether it's to get into this wonderful career, whether it's even to have this trophy wife or husband with trophy kids, right? Honestly, that's realistic. Some people, it's more about showing off than actually wanting to have a family. But many times, this is what drives us. And James says this leads toward boasting, right? He talks about these great big boasts, this arrogance, and this denial of truth. That the more we are motivated by envy and selfish ambition, the further away we are from the truth. The further away we are from recognizing how small we are to this great big God. And instead we think we're greater. We think we are worthy of boasting to others. Right? And so James continues and says, this quote-unquote wisdom is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. That's a crazy word, right? You don't hear that often. James uses very strong words because he's making it very clear when you are going in this direction of serving yourself, of doing the things that are going to make you quote unquote successful, you're going in the wrong direction. You are not seeking the Holy Spirit. You are instead seeking other spirits. That is what it means to be demonic. You are obeying other spirits, not the Holy Spirit. So brothers and sisters, this ultimately is the way of the world, right? As we look around, as we look at society, this is what we are taught is good and normal. Get yours, right? Climb up to the top of that ladder. And unfortunately, brothers and sisters, whether we're in the church or not, we all seem to be kind of doing the same things. So the sad thing is that the way of the world, unfortunately, often tends to be the way of the church. And in many ways, we are even trying to, like I said before, the church has often been the place where people show off the most. Right? When I was in America, it was cars. Right? Nicest parking lot that I grew up at was my church parking lot. I would go around and I would look at all these nice cars. I was like, wow, I've never been this close to a car. Told you about those doctors that had these Mazda RX-7 sports cars. There's two of them. It's like a pair. One was red, one was silver. They were coming together. I was like, ooh. You know what car we had? We had a Chevy Astrovan. And I remember once I was playing with the cigarette lighter just for fun. And I just said, oh, look at this. I'm making it warm. That I actually shorted the battery. So my dad's like, why isn't the car started? I was like, I don't know. I never told him. But anyway. And so for me, I grew up in a church culture that really celebrated earthly success. And I don't think they were doing it on purpose. But I grew up in a neighborhood where there were private schools that were excellent. In Maryland, where I grew up, there was a school called Gilman, which was an all-boys school. There was a school called McDonough, which was a co-ed school. But these were schools that if you got into, it was almost the same amount as college tuition. And then kids that went to these schools, they all went to Ivy Leagues. Right? If you didn't get into an Ivy League, something's wrong with you. But that was basically a good portion of the people at my church. I remember particularly the class above me, I think 70% of them were Gilman or McDonough kids. Right? My class was the dumb class. We were all public school. I don't know what happened. But actually the funny thing is, from my class and below, our church quote unquote got dumber. Because there are less people in private school, there are more in public as we got younger. But regardless, I grew up in a church culture, whether they were doing it intentionally or not, that was showing us this is how you succeed. This is how you're supposed to live your life. And we come to church to show it off. Right? And then the Korean way you show off is you don't do it directly, you do it indirectly. Right? Like the moment you become a parent, you no longer have a name. Right? Well, first off, the moment you get a title, that's your name. So I never know people's Korean names because I only know their titles. Chipsani, Chanuni, Kwanzani. That's all I know. Maybe I'll throw the last name. That's about it. But then the other thing is when you have kids, you are so-and-so's amma or appa. Right? And so your very identity goes into your kids. So what do? You start focusing all on your kid and you start you raise your kid to be this epic standard, and then you compare with everybody else, right? That's the culture I grew up in. This is the way of the world. Thank you, messed up computer. And so what are we supposed to do? It's okay. Just let it go. God's speaking. So if you go back to the beginning of James 1, verse 5, so 1:5, it says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. So the first thing James made clear already in chapter 1 is that wisdom comes from God. Even though the world is telling you all these different things, all you need to do is go to God and He will give you the wisdom that you need. And as the passage continues, it says this earthly, this unspiritual, this demonic wisdom actually leads to disorder and every evil practice. One of the things and one thing about the word disorder, it also shows up in James chapter 1 again, where it says, but when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. That word unstable is the same word as disorder, used in chapter 3. Right? So what James has already said is that when you lack faith, when you ask God for something but you doubt that He will do it, when you lack faith, you are a person of disorder. And now he says is when you listen to earthly wisdom and you live it out, that also leads to disorder. Now if you put this back into the context of James talking to teachers of the law, one of the things that is your biggest giveaway if someone is a quote-unquote false teacher, it's someone who creates division. If someone comes up to you and says, hey, there's a secret way to God, right? Brother, oh, this is the only way into heaven. And they give you something that divides you and separates you. Brothers and sisters, that is almost definitely a false teacher. When someone is motivated by earthly wisdom, rather than bringing unity, harmony, and peace, they bring division, they bring discord, and they create factions and separate. So what is heavenly wisdom? Now, unfortunately, James spends most of his time focusing on what wisdom isn't. Then he gives us a very quick blah. This is what godly wisdom is. He's like, it's pure, right? Pure meaning that it has no selfish ambition, it has no selfish desires. It is pure. It is innocent. It is peace-loving. So rather than seeking division and disorder, it draws people together. It brings peace. Heavenly wisdom is considerate. It considers others. Right? It doesn't put the person above others, but it puts them above themselves. It is submissive. This is a word you will never see with earthly wisdom. Heavenly wisdom knows to submit to those in authority, understanding that God has placed them there. Heavenly wisdom is full of mercy and good fruit. So as James is focused on being generous, being a giving person, showing mercy even when you have every right to demand your own justice. And lastly, being impartial and sincere. Right? Heavenly wisdom does not take sides. Heavenly wisdom tries its best to really encourage, to lift up everyone, regardless of whoever they are. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to spend too much time on this, but I encourage you guys throughout this week to really focus on that part of the passage where James tells us about heavenly wisdom, and to really ask God, give me this kind of wisdom. Help me to live a life in this way, rather than living in the way of the world, to live in a way that glorifies and honors you. That is this. This is heavenly wisdom. This is the way of the Lord. Here there is no boasting. Here there is no selfish ambition. Here there is no envy. You're not envious of other people because you are at peace with what God has given you. You are at peace with others. This is the way of the Lord. So I encourage you, brothers and sisters, to really focus on these aspects of what wisdom truly is. This will encourage you and challenge you. So James, he finishes out this passage by saying, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. Now there's a couple things that will stick out to you. At first you'll probably see this and you'll be like, that sounds a little bit like something Jesus would say. Right? That sounds like one of the Beatitudes almost. But one of the things that also should stick out is it's actually something that counters something he said in chapter 1, where he said, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. So what does this tell us? Anger does not produce righteousness, but peace does. Peace trumps anger. Peace wins. Right? Some of you guys are laughing because I used the word Trump. Right? And Trump is the last person you think of with peace. Although, ironically, there is the summit coming up just in a couple of days. This word existed before Trump, okay? This is making that very clear. This is not a verbalization of his name. But what this is telling us is that peace wins. Anger doesn't. And James is making it very clear. Anger, bitter envy, selfish ambitions, those are the way of the world, but our way is one of peace. This is a very difficult thing. And actually, the Plan Brothers and Sisters is a little bit down the road later in this year. Actually, the next book we're going to look at is the book of Malachi. After that, we're probably going to look at the Sermon on the Mount. And so you're going to hear a similar message on this when Jesus himself gives the Sermon on the Mount and gives this radical understanding of the law and the way of life that actually promotes peace over our sense of justice. You turn the other cheek, right? Someone takes your robe away, you give them another cloak, right? That's the way of Christ. And James is clearly understanding that when he says peace leads to righteousness. So, as chapter 2 focused that genuine faith, is your faith genuine? We know it's genuine by seeing its good works. But brothers and sisters, genuine faith also leads to heavenly wisdom. When you truly believe in who God is, you truly believe in what He has done for you, that will lead to you living this way of holiness, this way of heavenly wisdom. So if there's anything that you need to focus on, it's asking God, what is that? Is that a bird? It's crazy. Something living in here, my brothers and sisters. Which means out there. We're going to leave in peace, brothers and sisters, whatever this is. And so what I want us to understand is that faith and wisdom come from God. Okay? This is not something we can manufacture on our own. This is not something we can develop and just work into. This is something we truly need to ask God for. And so as I've shown you very clearly what earthly wisdom looks like, and I've given you a very brief glimpse of what heavenly wisdom is, our challenge today, brothers and sisters, is to go before God and say, God, I want your wisdom. God, I want you to increase my faith, my understanding of you, my belief in you, so that I can have more wisdom and live in the path of holiness rather than the way of the world. Let's take some time to pray. We'll go ahead and close for today. Now, as we've ended on this topic of peace, if there is an area in your life that is lacking peace, whether it's something you're going through, whether it's struggles at school or at work, or whether it's a particular relationship, someone that you haven't completely reconciled with, I want you to just take a moment to ask God, God, help me to be a peacemaker. That I have discord, I have anger, but Father, help me to instead choose peace in this situation. So let's take a moment to ask God, God, where am I lacking peace? And give me the courage and the strength to be a peacemaker in that place. Let's pray. Brothers and sisters, as we've been shown what wisdom isn't, let's pray instead that God would give us His heavenly wisdom. This wisdom that counters everything that the world teaches us, everything that the world says is worthwhile and successful, but instead glorifies Him, reflects Him, shows Him to this world. Let's pray, brothers and sisters, that God would give us this wisdom, and God would also increase our faith, which would also lead to more and more godly wisdom. Let's pray for an increase of wisdom and faith. Let's pray. Father, you are the giver of good things. And Father, you have brought us into relationship with you through Jesus Christ, your Son, who died on the cross for us. And as we stand in your presence, and as we stand in relationship with you once more, help us, Lord, to seek to become more like you. Understanding, Lord, that you have gifted us in many ways. You have given us, Lord, the ability to do so many different things, Lord, even with this tongue that is so powerful, Lord. But we can only honor you when we walk in the way of wisdom, when we walk in a way that glorifies and edifies your name. So, Father, increase our faith, increase our wisdom. Help us to live in a way that counters, Lord, everything that the world shows itself to be good, but instead is evil. Help us instead, Lord, to be set apart as you are. We thank you, Lord, and we praise you in the name of Jesus. Amen.